Well, hey, everybody. Welcome to tonight's Ingles on the Beat show. I'm Mike Griffith of Dog Nation, along with the AJC, and really excited tonight to bring you a really special guest. We're going to jump right into it. It's Mr. Bill Hancock, and Bill is the executive director of the college football playoffs. Bill, thank you so much for joining us. Are you at your home back there? What is it, Hobart, Oklahoma, right? See Bill here on the screen.
Dadgummit, I'm there. I forgot to unmute. That leaves a little note of reality to the situation, doesn't it? Who watching has not been on a Zoom call and failed to unmute? So mark me down. Yeah, we're home. We're working remotely as always, as many of us are during the pandemic, getting by very efficient, actually, getting a lot of work done. And I know for one, our senior staff is doing more work now than they would in any July in the past. We're getting by just like everybody else is.
Yeah, I'll tell you, Bill, it's been a tough off season. And for folks that don't know Bill's not out front and center, but you know what? He is accountable. I want to say that. You know, there's so many events I go to, and a lot of times you kind of say, who's in charge here? And they'll tell you, and then you can never find them. The cool thing about Bill Hancock, whether it was his time with the NCAA basketball tournament or now with the college football playoff, is Bill's front and center. And you can find him. If you've got a question, you can ask him. And I think that's why over the years, 5 decades worth of years for Bill Hancock now, I believe he's the most universally trusted and respected figure in collegiate athletics. And I think that's why he's in charge of the college football playoffs. You know, Bill, you spent 16 years with the NCAA men's basketball tournament, 13 years as a director. And then in 2005, you jump on and become the executive director of the BCS, which preceded this system. And now since the invent of the college football playoffs, you've been in charge of that. I guess I would just ask you to reflect back on these years and years of service and what are some important points, memories that stand out as we've kind of evolved collegiate athletic over these years?
Well, thank you for the kind words, Mike. And I will say I am the luckiest guy I know to have spent those 16 years in my dream job, which was the NCAA tournament, and then getting to come over to football. And this will be my 16th season in college football. Never imagined I would get to do what I've gotten to do. A lot of it has been in the right place at the right time. And that old axiom that our fathers taught us, which was 90% of life is just showing up. I believe in that. Show up, hang out, listen more than you talk, and you're going to do well in life.
Well, I'll tell you what, you talk about just showing up, and I'll share this quick story with our viewers tonight, Bill. So I was assigned to cover the London Olympics in 2012, and let me tell you, I was one lost puppy over there. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't recognize any faces, and there were a lot of languages I couldn't tell you what dialect they were. And they told me, they said, Mike, we need you to go to the opening ceremonies. And I said, well, that's great. And they said, okay, well, you should have already applied for that credential. And I said, well, that's not great. And they said, well, why didn't you apply for that credential? I said, well, I didn't know that. Well, you need to apply. And I'm going, oh, my goodness. I am about ready to jump off the London Bridge here because I don't have a credential for the opening ceremonies the night before the opening ceremonies in London. So I drugged my butt up to the credential office, and I'm thinking I need a miracle. And lo and behold, there was my miracle. Bill Hancock was handling the credentialing for the opening ceremonies. I wanted to fall at Bill's feet, first of all, just a familiar face that spoke the same language. And then secondly, Bill, somehow, some way, you found a way to get me into those opening ceremonies. And 8 years later, I want to thank you again. I don't know how you did it, but you probably saved my job in London.
Oh, I remember that evening so well, Mike, and that's what I was there for, to help people. You deserved it. You earned that credential. And another way in which I'm very lucky is I get to work for the U.S. Olympic Committee at the Games. And Tokyo was to have been my 14th Olympics. Next summer, when we get to go to Tokyo, that will be number 14. And it's a remarkable experience. Being around people from all over the world. Yes, being an island, kind of a friendly face for American reporters, particularly those who don't cover the Olympics very often. Just to know there's someplace where you can go and get an answer. So it's totally a volunteer gig for me, and I love it. The first one I worked was 1984 in Los Angeles. And I remember coming home from those games saying, I'll never get to go to another one. I get that, but I got to go to one. And that's all I need. It was a great experience. And by the way, I spent most of my time in LA, or much of my time, with Claude Felton, because Claude was working at those games also. So that's where we became good friends. Small world.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, you two are absolutely two of the best. And, I'm sure of our viewers have probably already picked up on the fact that Bill doesn't sound like your typical suit or executive. Well, that's because Bill's been a newspaper editor. He also authored 2 books. So we're talking about a very well-rounded man. And I think that's why so many people in the media industry respect Bill and trust Bill. He's kind of walked in our shoes. And then certainly the student athletes and the coaches, they've seen him oversee these tournaments for years and years and years. And again, when you're looking at tournaments and playoffs and things like that, I think integrity is a very important issue. Now, Bill, you brought up Tokyo a moment ago, and we know that that's on hold. And right now we're starting to see all these different models for college football kind of filter out. But before we get to that, I want to ask you, recently, there's been some Pac-12 athletes, and we've seen this. And again, I know you're not in charge of the NCAA, but we still ask you these questions because you've just been around so long and you've seen so much. Maybe you can add some perspective or some thoughts. This has been a very challenging offseason, I think, for everyone. And certainly there's a lot of concerns. I know that coaches, commissioners, the NCAA executives, they're all doing their best to try to answer questions in what seems to be, the most fluid situation that we've really maybe ever encountered in our lifetime. Do you have a thought or a feeling about where the Pac-12 demands are at, or just college football and the start of it in general? Are you optimistic?
Yeah, Mike, before I go there, I will talk about that briefly, but before I go there, I want to just talk about my other Georgia connections. Rode my bicycle across the country several years ago and finished at Tybee Island. So that was a great experience, riding from West Point, Lynette, and West Point over to Tybee Island. And then, of course, a lot of time in Atlanta working on NCAA tournaments, and then certainly CFP, and a lot of hours at UGA and Georgia Tech. And then I love the Masters. So I feel like I'm an adopted son of the state of Georgia. But to talk about the Pac-12 athletes document they put out, we all have an obligation to listen to athletes. I am not tied up with that. My plate is plenty full with the college football playoff, but I'm watching it, and I'm proud of athletes for speaking up, but also know that athletes are getting a lot of benefits from their education and from everything they receive on campus, healthcare, certainly all the well-being that they get, and plus the education. So let's all just keep an eye on that, but keep listening to the athletes.
Yeah, I think that's where we're at. We hear a lot of coaches. I know Kirby Smart and Greg McGarity, some of those Georgia figures you're talking about. Certainly, I think Greg Sankey has been tremendous at the forefront of all this for the SEC, really keeping people informed and updated, because it does change. And at the end of the day, Bill, I think we all recognize that COVID-19 and health experts are they're really the ones flying this plane. I mean, we're making sure as far as the colleges and the coaches, the universities, the doctors, they're making sure this thing is ready to go when the COVID-19 numbers allow for the takeoff. So let's hope that that's late August. I've seen a couple week 0 games. I know the SEC is pushed back to September 26th. That seemed a little late for some, but you think about it, and you got a lot of kids coming back to school right now. And plus, it's going to afford an opportunity for a lot of these coaches and athletic directors to kind of get a feel and see what happens with the NFL. My thought was, though, with the season being pushed back to September 26th, Bill, one of the things that I always look forward to as a beat writer is that first release of the very first college football rankings. And it seemed like it was always around the middle of October. And I thought it was good because, used to be college football rankings would come out early, and it seemed like people were maybe reluctant to drop teams down. And then you all came up with that model. And I guess I would just ask you that, whose idea was that to maybe wait until the second week of October? And do we have any kind of timeline when those first rankings might come out this season?
It was a collective decision to wait until week 9 or 10, let a lot of games happen. Do not be influenced by any preseason rankings. Certainly do not be influenced by what happened last year or any other year in the past. Give us enough games to where we had enough data to evaluate and enough opportunities for the committee to watch teams. The schedule does appear that it will be later this year. We don't know for sure. We're kind of in a wait and see mode about that. But I suspect we'll again in week, I don't know, somewhere 8, 9, 10-ish, get started with the rankings. Again, we're just in a wait and see mode right now.
Right. There's a 13-member panel. And I always wondered, and you do a very good job of bringing different representatives on from different areas. I look at the current panel that's up. I see Gary Barta, the chairman from the University of Iowa. Paula Bovin, I remember Paula working at the Arizona Republic. Now she's a professor at Arizona State. Tom Berman is the AD at Wyoming. Joe Castiglione, he's the director of athletics at Oklahoma. Rick George, the AD at Colorado. Ken Hatfield, we remember Coach Hatfield. He's retired now. He coached at 3 different football organizations. Ronnie Lott, everybody remembers Ronnie, that hard-hitting safety that from the 49ers, a former USC star, and Terry Mohier from Arkansas State University, someone from maybe a smaller school, but they still play some powerhouses. Ray Ordino, he's a former chief of staff from the United States Army. Certainly I can respect that as a veteran. R.C. Slocum, college football Hall of Famer, former A&M coaches on the panel. Georgia fans are no stranger to Todd Stansberry. He's the Georgia Tech AD. Scott Strickland, the AD at Florida. And John Urso, a former All-American from Penn State. So we have a very interesting cross-section of people on the College Football Playoff Committee. How did that thought come about to maybe get some different folks with the different viewpoints?
I think this group, the way we structured our group is the best way to rank teams, frankly, in the history of college football. I don't want to go into hyperbole land, but that's the way I feel about it. We decided right after the playoff was created that we want a broad-based, diverse group of experts. NCAA sports committees, the one we all know the best is the NCAA basketball committee, which I worked with for those 16 years and which I have all kinds of respect for. But those are all people who work on campus or in conference offices. And we decided, no, let's bring in others. Let's bring in outsiders. Let's bring in a retired journalist. Let's bring in university presidents. Condoleezza Rice, of course, fits that mode as a former provost at Stanford. Let's bring in, people from the community who know the game very well. We had Mike Gould, who was the superintendent of the Air Force Academy, and then, as you mentioned, General Odierno now. So the diversity gives us a broad base of opinions, a broad base of outlooks on football. But the one consistent thing is they're all football experts. I'm proud of this group, enjoy working with them, love working with them, frankly, and just ready to get going.
Yeah, no doubt. Bill, one of the neat things that you did, and I thought this was good, I was talking to a business expert professor the other day. He stressed the importance of the face-to-face meeting. Well, obviously, COVID is intervened in our lives right now. And as you mentioned, we're all doing a lot more Zoom. How does the College Football Playoff Committee plan to proceed? I'm assuming you'll go by Zoom. I know in the past you've flown these folks into Dallas to all sit around and watch these games and convene. I'm sure that's led to some very productive conversation. Is there a plan in place to meet in person, or will it be by Zoom as things stand?
It'll be in person as things stand now. Obviously, one thing we've all learned with COVID is where things stand today might be different than where they stand tomorrow. But yeah, we're planning to meet in person as always.
Is there a tentative meeting date right now, or has that been determined?
No, we had November 2nd and 3rd. That was the plan. But it appears that the selection day will be delayed. And so we're just going to wait and see where selection day lands and go back from there.
Yeah. So we don't really know when the rankings are going to come out yet. One of the things that's different, Bill, the schedule models. We've already seen the Big Ten and Pac-12, and now the SEC saying they're going to play conference only. I know ACC is looking at this model of conferences plus one non-conference. And forgive me, I don't know if the Big 12, I know they had a call today. I'm not sure if they've announced their scheduling plan or not. So, but the thing that strikes me is with less of these intra-conference, non-conference games going on, that would seem like there would be fewer data points as your committee looks to do the rankings. Have you discussed, I guess, ballpark, just how these college football rankings will work now that there's even fewer data points between these schools and the potential for transitive properties?
Yes, we've had a lot of conversation about that, and we'll have more to come before we put anything in stone. But clearly, the lack of those relative lack, or maybe total lack, who knows, of those marquee, quote unquote, non-conference games will make things different for the committee. This is why we have a committee of 13 experts who can watch teams on video and use the data that we do have to discern, to evaluate, and to rank the teams. Think about those marquee games, and you can just go back through. Georgia Notre Dame was a huge game that season. Yeah. We had two years in a row Ohio State Oklahoma games. I believe they were 2 years in a row. Very significant games. Last year, Auburn, Oregon. So you can just go through every year, and there's been those games. And without those this year, it will make it more of a challenge for the committee. But the committee, this is what the committee is built for. This is why we have those experts. And I will say, frankly, if we were in a strictly data-driven situation like we were in with the BCS, I might be more worried about it. But because we have the experts, I'm confident.
Yeah, that's a great point, Bill. And I've seen different talks about different systems. And, of course, there's an advantage, disadvantage for anything you do, obviously. I thought the BCS was a good way to unify all the conferences. It was part of the process. To me, it's an evolution, sports, college, really life. When we take a look at it, we're all going to evolve through this COVID-19. We're doing things differently out of necessity. And, as you point out, now the College Football Playoff Committee, they may need to innovate a little bit. I was going to ask you, it's been 6 years now. Have there been some changes? Have there been some lessons learned that are now being applied that maybe weren't applied on the front end of the College Football Playoff?
We look at the system every year after the season and really look at every aspect of it and see if there's things that we can do better. And I will say that every basic thing has not changed since we started. Probably a tribute to the group that first started the playoff when they set everything up, because they set it up very well. And the protocol, the systems have really stood the test of time. My theory is we want to be our own harshest critic, frankly. We need to make sure we're doing everything right. And just looking through the years, no, there haven't been any significant changes. The key is gathering small groups of teams together that can be evaluated against each other. You don't evaluate 30 teams all at once. You get a small group of 6 and you dissect those and compare those. And then you put them into the rankings. There's 7 steps of rankings. But the key is, with the 7 steps, is small groups evaluated side by side against each other.
That's interesting. I know one of the rules, if you will, and one of the built-in safeguards you have with some sitting ADs, when their teams are discussed, for example, if Florida's discussed or Oklahoma's discussed, that athletic director from that respective school, from what I understand, they leave the room and can't be a part of those discussions, correct?
That's correct. That's recusals. And we started the recusals from day one. Our recusals are broader in football than we had when I was with the NCAA basketball committee. And they're broader from this standpoint. Our recusals apply if you are compensated by a school or a family member is, a sibling, children, then you have to be recused from that school. And we've had the children affected. Well, Frank Beamer is probably the best example. Shane, when Shane was at UGA, Frank had to be recused. When Shane moved on to Oklahoma, then Frank had to be recused from Oklahoma. Paula Bovin, you mentioned, retired sports writer, now professor at Arizona State. Paula's daughter worked at Boise State and was compensated by the school. So Paula was recused from Boise State. It works. The recusal policy is sound, it's solid, and it works.
Right now, Bill, and you know the contract better than me. What do we have? Another 5 years contracted with a 14 playoff? Is that correct?
Yep, 5 after this season.
Okay, so this season plus 5 more. Is there any chance, any remote asteroid hitting, that we could see an 18 playoff? Is that window? Who would have to be the ones to introduce that when we talk about the limited data points, when we talk about the potential for a limited season? Who knows if they cancel 2, 3, 4 games? Maybe there's only 8 games. Maybe people feel like, gosh, you got to get more people involved. Is that possibility anywhere out there exist at all?
It hasn't been discussed at all, Mike. Not a bit.
Yeah, and I understand that, because right now we're looking at the full season. We're looking at the different conferences still having their conference championship games, and so it would make sense that hasn't been discussed yet. Obviously, you would be the first to know. I wonder a little bit when I think about the college football playoffs, and what are we looking at? Is it January 11th in Miami? Is that the championship?
January 11th. Yep.
Okay, I remembered that. Good.
Hope to see you there, by the way.
I want to be in Miami. That's my favorite. I love Miami. I love me some Miami, Bill. That's a great stadium there, and I've seen some fantastic football games there, whether it was Alabama, Notre Dame, or Oklahoma, Florida game stands out to me. But we've had some special moments there. We all hope that January 11th we're still on par. But when you sit back and take a look at it, you're going, well, now look at this. Here we got the SEC championship game currently being scheduled for December 19th. So to this point, those dates still remain in effect for the different playoff semifinals and the championship game. Is that correct?
They do, yes.
Okay. Would there be a scenario? I mean, will there be some contingency plans built in, or is it, this is the way it's going to go until we know otherwise? Or do you discuss or come up with maybe some other, someone said to me, well, could they be moved back to February if need be? Could it be, how far back could it reasonably be moved back?
We're set to play on semifinals January 1 and champ game January 11. And that's where we'll be unless something changes. And one of the commissioners said to me the other day, the key word is nimble. And we will be nimble. But for now, we are set. We're solid. We're planning on a champ game January 11th in Miami.
One of the cool things for the fans that haven't, and I know a lot of SEC fans, certainly you had 15 teams play for titles in the last 14 years. The SEC fans are very familiar. And so I'm probably preaching to the choir. They love all the activities that go on around these games. It's so much more than just the game. And yet I think I saw where the Rose Bowl parade has been canceled. Bill, are we still planning on the teams arriving at the same time? Or are there still plans for the fan events, or have those things already been altered or reconsidered as far as arrival dates for teams and potential fan activities around college football playoff games?
We don't know the details yet, Mike, but I think everybody needs to realize that this will not be a normal season for college football. How could it be? It's not a normal world. Now, abnormal in what ways, we just don't know yet. And we're still, 5 months away, I guess, from our champ game. So we have time. We'll be ready, but we are not planning on a normal year.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, when you make these sorts of decisions, I know that recently the Red Box Bowl, which was played in Northern California, I know they've recently bowed out of the bowl games. I think there were 41 bowl games before that, maybe down to 40. But that New Year's Six, now we've kind of gotten into this tiered system, and I think it's been good. I know Georgia last year played in the New Year's Six Bowl. It wasn't a playoff game, and yet that Sugar Bowl win meant so much to the Georgia fans that went down there and got a chance to see Georgia redeem themselves after a disappointing performance the year before, but a great performance for Texas. Texas's first 10-win season in 10 years, their first game out of state, a very important game for Texas. Those New Year's Six Bowls carry a lot of weight. Is there a threshold for attendance that would be needed for those games to take place? I know we talked with Gary Stokan a little bit, and he'd mentioned in the Kickoff Classic that for that game to make sense, preseason game to make sense, they needed a certain amount of people there. Will that be the case with the New Year's Six Bowls as well?
No, there won't be a threshold for attendance. Whatever we have to do attendance-wise, we'll do.
Yeah, I've kind of wondered about that because those games do kind of stand on their own. And what was the history of the New Year's Six, Bill? I know part of the college football playoff, obviously, everyone likes the rotating semifinals in different cities. Obviously, Atlanta has been a big part of the college football playoffs with both the title game and playoff game. But was that kind of what was that bred out of? Because to me, that's one of the more interesting and fascinating parts of this playoff is the semifinal games and the rotating cities.
Yeah, it's pretty simple, Mike. The six games came when we decided to rotate the semifinals, and we just set up a 3-year rotation for the semifinals. So that gave us 6 games, and then we needed a way to have the teams assigned to those 6 games when they were not hosting semifinals. And that's where the policy came through that the committee assigns them in some years, and of course some years with Rose, Sugar, and Orange, their champions, their teams come from their conferences. But the 6 games all came about because of the 3-year rotation of the semifinal hosts.
It's been interesting. It's been fascinating. I know that the college football playoffs have been celebrated by many. Certainly, it's created a lot of conversation. You've even told me that, hey, part of this is the excitement. And with your experience with the NCAA tournament and March Madness, I think you probably see some carryover. And certainly, not all the fan bases are going to be happy at the end of the year, but that's still kind of the nature of college football. Bill, just think where we were in 1997 when we had Nebraska and Michigan, and I don't think anybody was happy with that turnout, that there was a split title and all the split titles and multiple champions year before. You've been through that. Could you have foreseen something like this in the evolution, and just how much more clarity is there now, do you believe, to maybe back in those different eras of the 80s and even the early 90s?
Yeah, what we have now is so much better than the way it was back then, but it was a different time then. And crystal balling, I think we might have said, well, maybe something like what we have now might work, but it was evolutionary. Didn't happen overnight, as you know. Remember, we had 3 years of Bowl Coalition, 3 years of the Bowl Alliance, 16 years of the BCS. So 22 years right there in getting from the old bowl system to the college football playoff. But we're way better now than we were, and it's so cool to have the champion decided on the field.
I remember a couple of years ago, Bill, and I started the program talking about your transparency and your accountability. And I remember us being in California on that floor, and I think you got swarmed by about 18 different reporters that day. And you told me when you finished, you said, I don't remember what I said. Did I do okay? I said, you did excellent. And a lot of these guys were kind of snapped. There was some New York media there. They were kind of snapping back at you. But one of the questions that was asked that I thought was interesting was, can the little guy win a championship? I think Central Florida was the issue. And your response was play somebody. And do you think we're starting to see more aggressive scheduling models? Do you think we're starting to see teams kind of figure that out? Because I look at Georgia's future schedule, and even for an SEC teams, they're scheduling very aggressively. Alabama's scheduling very aggressively. And where do you stand with the Boise States and the Central Floridas? Are you still convinced that programs like that can find their way in the college football playoff?
Oh, yes, I am, Mike. Those programs have such a better chance than they've ever had before in the history of college football. The CFP gives them a better chance than ever. Better chance to get in the playoff and a better chance to get in one of those top-tier bowl games because of the CFP. Play a good schedule, win your games, and you're going to be in the hunt.
Yeah, and I think we've seen that barn out. We've seen some teams that were close and maybe tripped up at the end. Any final thoughts, Bill? I mean, like I said, you're someone that has so much respect. It's been around the game so long. Just some general thoughts and look into your crystal ball. What are your thoughts about college football, the direction that we're moving, maybe some things that we can anticipate or some things that maybe you even wonder about moving forward?
Well, my first thing is short term. Let's put on our masks and let's practice our social distancing. If for no other reason, then we can hope that we get college football back this year because of it. Don't want to get preachy. Don't want to get. I can't believe that we're dealing with politics in this pandemic time. But let's do that and let's give ourselves a chance. Long-term college football is there's so much passion for this game that I know you love and I love, and probably everybody watching this loves the game just as much as we do. And so the passion for college football will carry it through. And yeah, we may have a little abnormal year this year, and we all know that. We'll get through it. We'll decide a champion, and then hopefully we'll be back to where we were soon. But the game is so popular, and I just know that at the UGA, at the times I've been to UGA, what a great place. You see it, you feel it, you feel the passion, you sense and feel the history, and the ability for people to say, my grandfather, my great-grandfather sat right over there on the 40-yard line. And that was his seat. And if I can, I go by and see that seat every time I go to the stadium, that kind of thing. And it's replicated all over the country every weekend. This is what's great about college football. And I just feel so blessed and so lucky to get to spend 24/7 working in this great sport that I love so much.
Well, Bill, I know the sport's very appreciative of you as well. You're in so many Hall of Fames. If people call up your resume on the computer, it'll take them 10 minutes just to read through all the Hall of Fames and honors that you've accumulated over the years. But it is people like you that make the sport special. And again, that accountability factor, sometimes it's so hard to get the guy on the phone. Who's the guy in charge? And, you tell us what you can tell us. You're forward, you're honest, you're transparent, and you've always been accountable. And as a reporter, and just as someone, as you said, that follows college football, such a great appreciation for that. And again, I'll say it again. I think you're the most universally trusted and respected man in NCAA college football. So thank you so much for joining us here tonight on our program. I'll certainly be in touch. I know that you'll put the information out as soon as you got it. And right now we're all just kind of doing our best to, as you said, maybe evolve and get through this crisis.
Well, Mike, thank you for the kind words. I really appreciate it. And it's just always great to be with you. Take care.
Yes, sir, my friend. We'll see you down the road, Bill.
Bye.
Mr. Bill Hancock. Boy, great having Bill on the program tonight. I requested Bill earlier this summer, and it just worked out really well to have Bill on tonight when you think about it. All the different conference schedules are coming out, and a little bit better lay of the land, and yet and still, Bill's saying, hey, right now, all systems go. Right now, all those dates that we see have not changed. Even with the December 19th SEC championship game, and I know the ACC is looking at the 12th or the 19th, and again, I have not yet seen what the Big 12 model is. I'll check that out real quick and see if there's been some news on that tonight. But Bill's saying that right now all systems go. I thought that was an important takeaway. Also, that there's no threshold for attendance for the New Year's Six games. I know there were some people saying, well, if they can't have X number of fans, are they still going to have them? Bill's saying they're still going to have them. They're going to drive forward. Look, as he said, not a normal time. It's going to be a little abnormal. We've all been challenged, certainly, and we're thankful for the people that have pressed forward and kind of helped us gotten through these difficult times. I know our sponsor, Ingles, has done a great job on the front lines. I know we trust them to get our goods at our supermarkets. And I want to take a minute, play this ad for you to respect and appreciate what Ingles has done during this pandemic.
It's in our hearts to feel for you. There's been ups and downs, turnarounds, good days and some bad. But we stand together for worse and for better. We'll always have your back with open arms, heart to heart, hand in hand, community strong.
Welcome back, Mike Griffith here. And again, I hope you were able to watch that presentation with Bill Hancock. He's the College Football Playoff Executive Director. I thought Bill explained a lot about the playoffs. And look, Bill knows, and I've talked to Bill about this. I was vocal a couple of years ago when Georgia didn't get into playoff. I don't put that on Bill Hancock. I want to be very clear about that. This is the system. This is the process. I had questions about it. I didn't have questions necessarily about the ethics of it. I thought it was a difficult position for some of those athletic directors to be in. But there is no perfect system, and Bill brought up a great point. If we were back in the BCS, a system that I really enjoyed, but with the lack of transitive properties, if we were relying upon those numbers, boy, would we be in trouble this year. because we're not going to see a lot of these non-conference games against one another. We know that the SEC has gone conference only, the Big Ten gone conference only, Pac-12 has gone conference only. Very hard to evaluate those games against other conferences when there's no intra-conference play. So I think this is a year where the college football playoff, the way it's set up, really benefits college football. I think you also heard Bill say they need to be nimble. That means they're prepared for change, okay? They're not necessarily locked in saying this is going to be the way it is come hell or high water. It's planned to be this way. Currently, there's no plans to change, but Bill left the door open for some dates changing. Very important. Also, when I asked him, could there be an 18 playoff? He didn't slam that door shut airtight. He said it hasn't been discussed yet. So those were some key takeaways from the Bill Hancock interview. Thought that was very interesting. I hope all of you have enjoyed the presentation tonight on the Ingles on the Beat show. I know that, last week, I think we were all maybe, I don't know if caught off guard is the right word, but when the SEC went conference only, I was kind of like, wow, I think we all thought that the SEC was going to go +1 model, similar to what the ACC did. And some people said, boy, did the SEC ever get even with the ACC, or did they respond? Well, I want to be clear. That's not what happened. The SEC athletic directors made their recommendation before the ACC announced their model on Wednesday. So last Wednesday, just to be clear, so last Wednesday, the timeline was the ACC athletic directors had a call and came up with their recommendation to go conference only. And then an hour, 2 hours later, the ACC announced their model. Now, their model kind of surprised the SEC, but the SEC did not make their decision in response to the ACC. Now, a lot of people think that because the SEC announced it afterward. But the truth of the matter is, and this is coming from athletic directors, Greg Sankey, they did not make their decision based on the ACC. So I know that revisionist history sometimes can become rampant on social media. One person says it, another person retweets it. People start talking about a scenario that never happened. And before you know it, perception overtakes reality. So very important that people understand that the SEC made their decision not in response to anyone else. They did this in what they believe was the best interest of their conference. Some people have talked about the loss of these rivalries. I'll be honest, Florida State was pretty relevant in the 1990s. I don't know that it's really been that relevant. I'm sure some people could probably say 2 or 3 occasions since the millennium. Clemson, South Carolina, Steve Spurrier kind of had Dabo's number, but let's face it, that game's turned into a bit of a blowout. Georgia Tech might be the most lopsided of any so-called rivalry between teams from different divisions. I don't think many people are going to miss that outside of a very select few that have some memories, some sentimental memories attached to it. I kind of liken it to Notre Dame and Purdue. Some people said we didn't even know they had a rivalry. Well, they did. They played every year till 2014. It wasn't much of a contest. It was in-state. That's kind of what's happened to Georgia Tech. Now, Kentucky and Louisville, a couple of basketball schools playing football. There's some bragging rights on the line, and Kentucky has scored some nice wins. I think they beat the Louisville coach when he was named the ACC Coach of the Year over Dabo Swinney, a year that Dabo Swinney won a national title. And I just said, wow, the ACC's trying way too hard when you're giving guys Coach of the Year awards over a national championship coach. That's a little bit of a side note. But my point is this. I don't think we're really losing that much on those 4 games. There's bigger rivalries that we've lost. Michigan-Notre Dame was a pretty big rivalry. Notre Dame and USC this year would be a big rivalry to lose. Oklahoma-Nebraska, Texas A&M. Those are the cornerstone rivalries that college football. This year's rivalries, not so much. I don't mean to say they're not important, but in the big picture from 10,000 feet, and Bill talked about that. He's been around and he understands the pageantry at Sanford Stadium, the stadium you see pictured behind me. I've obviously covered college football in just about every stadium, every Power 5 stadium across the country. And I can tell you it's very regionalized. When I went to Autzen Stadium in Oregon, what a fascinating environment. Sun Devil Stadium. I know some Georgia fans have been there. Incredible. Certainly the Rose Bowl. Georgia fans familiar with that. A lot of SEC fans familiar with that. Covered all the games. Everybody thinks they have the best tradition. Everybody thinks they've got the best fan bases. I can tell you it is a little more passionate some places than others. But, Nebraska, every bit as passionate as anywhere in the SEC. I'll say that. That might surprise some people. I know Michigan, Ohio State, certainly Virginia Tech loves their Enter Sandman. But my point is this. We'll get past all this. We'll get by all this. This season will be special. It'll be different, but it'll be special. And I've heard some people say there's going to be an asterisk next to this season. Well, you know what? So be it. To me, the team that wins the national championship this year, the team that can persevere, the team that can stay focused and stay on task and on point, to me, that makes this year's national championship that much more special. Think about it. I mean, just fast forward to yourself, sitting in your living room with your remote, going across all the games on September 26th. What a great feeling that's going to be. Now, certainly we want to be at the stadiums. We've seen limited attendance models, anywhere from 20% to 50%, COVID-19 numbers pending. But we've seen those models out there. Not everybody's going to get in. Let me tell you, those Saturday afternoons are going to be bigger than ever. These games are going to be so much. There's going to be so much intrigue that builds up with these conference-only games, so that when the playoffs and hopefully some of these bowls survive outside of the New Year's Six, you heard Bill say the New Year's Six, it's going to continue. There's not a threshold for attendance, but it's going to be so big to see these bowl games now. So much more intrigue, right? But we've got to be responsible. We've got to be measured in how we move forward. You heard Bill with the request for the mask. I'm certainly on board with that. Everybody, you got to be safe out there to make this thing work. I know the college football players are hearing that from their coaches. They're going to be challenged very soon when the students come back on the campuses. I think we're all going to have an ear to the ground. I think we're all going to be watching the COVID-19 numbers in the various collegiate cities across the country to see how responsible these young students will be and how these football players will handle it. We've seen some professional leagues handle it better than others. Lessons are being learned as we go. I think the SEC made the right call by waiting till September 26th. Greg Sankey told us it's like building the bridge as you cross the river, wanted to have as much information as possible before moving forward, and that's where we're at. And tonight you heard the College Football Playoff Executive Director tell you about where they're at. Didn't rule some things out. That's my takeaway. They're going to stay nimble. That's the presentation tonight. I want to thank everybody for joining me here on the Eagles on the Beat show. Hey, got to tell you, a week from tomorrow, we're going to have a private chat room. This is going to be something completely different. We're going to do a Zoom call with myself and Brandon Adams. And Brandon is the host of Dog Nation Daily every day on our Dog Nation Facebook page and our Dog Nation YouTube page. We're going to be in a room with these fans, and you're going to have your chance to be on the Zoom call. Put your image up there, show off your gear, maybe have your man cave behind you, and you're going to be able to ask us some questions, and we're going to have some discussions. We're going to have pretty special guests in the room. Can't tip my hand as to who's going to be in there, but I'll just say there's going to be some interesting folks in that room. If you go to the Dog Nation page right now, go to dognation.com, you'll see that article for that private Zoom conference. Sign up for it. It's only $10. $10, you'll be in the room for an hour. You'll be on the Zoom call with us. We'll be talking college football and advancing the stories that come up between now and next Tuesday, a week from tomorrow, August 11th. So if you get a chance, I know there's only a few spots left in that. And I say a few spots, I mean a few spots. I mean, I can count them on one hand. So you've got time, but go sign up for that. Get involved in the discussion. We'll take on all comers, any school, whoever your team is, go ahead and get signed up. We're going to have a lot of fun. Everybody have a very safe week, and thanks for joining me tonight on Eagles on the Beat.